Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today I have with me Kyle Shannon, who is the CEO of Storyvine, a video agility platform that helps clients do high quality, authentic video creation from anywhere, anytime. The platform produces video in minutes using auto magic editing. So I'm really excited to talk to you about Storyvine and your experience as a leader and CEO. Thank you so much for being here, Kyle.
Absolutely. Really happy to be here. Excited to be here. And yeah, thanks for the intro. Um, yeah, we've been around. May 1st was our 11th year anniversary. So we've been around for more than a decade. We do a lot of work in the healthcare and pharma space. So think, a large company wanting to have their patients talk about their experience with their condition or a treatment or whatever it might be. And our tool guides that end user, say a patient or a doctor, step by step through telling their story. I sometimes describe it as it's like karaoke for storytelling. So you just answer a series of prompts and then that goes up to the cloud. And a few minutes later, you've got a fully edited video.
I love that karaoke for storytelling. It's always so helpful to have a frame of reference.
That's it.
Okay, so are most of these people making these videos, do they tend to be for advertising purposes, like client testimonials? Or what when you're talking about yeah, tell me what those are for.
So where Storyvine really comes into its power is anywhere we've got replicable stories where it's the same kind of thing over and over again. Storyvine's really good. So there's kind of three major areas in healthcare and pharma that we use. Patient stories is one. So patients talking about their diagnosis journey or how their treatment's going, something like that.
And those
Uh,
are used for what?
oh, sorry, those are used for marketing in most
Yeah,
cases, right?
okay.
So it's the marketing organization. Um, Physician videos, what they call KOL videos or key opinion leader videos, where physicians are talking about a treatment, and that's intended for other physicians there's it's quasi education, but it's really marketing. And then the third big area is sales innovation. So sales reps actually using Storyvine to do personalized video outreach to doctors. So, hey, Dr. Smith, there's some new research on this. Would love to share that with you. We did a big project with Novartis last year, where in the first 6 months of the year, their reps created and shared more than 5,000 videos.
Wow.
So you can really start to do video storytelling at a scale that's kind of beyond what you could do with traditional production. And then the other thing that it does is so there's one. All of those components I talk about are kind of externally facing, but also you can use it for internally facing stuff. So whether it's executive communications or employee engagement or capturing best practices or training content. So it's a tool that kind of shapeshifts depending on where you aim it.
Hmm. I'm so curious how things have changed for you over the last 11 years because so much has changed.
So
So
much.
has the business shifted at all in terms of your goals, your vision?
Well, in the past year, well, I would even say in the past 6 months, goals and vision have changed dramatically. So I'll get to that.
Okay.
I'll share with you some of the things that have shifted over the years. So we're very fortunate in that we haven't really had to do a pivot, right? Technology companies, you hear about companies having to pivot, right? So they sort of hit the wall of we don't have product market fit. We haven't had to do that,
Hmm.
but some externalities have changed. So for example, years ago, early in the business, we talked a lot about you could use Storyvine for sales, right? And people always said, "Oh, that's a good idea," but they were never really necessarily motivated to do it because how they did sales worked, right? Well, then COVID happens, and all of a sudden, in the case of pharma in particular, they lost access to the doctors, right?
Yeah.
So that whole business was based on showing up at the doctor's office,
With
taking
your
the
meal. With your
with
meal
your
in
meal,
hand.
exactly, with your pizza in hand, right? And all of a sudden COVID happens and they lose access to those doctors. And the doctors are now like, hey, even though we're kind of going back to normal here from the pandemic perspective, you don't need to come to the office anymore. I'm good with doing Zoom meeting, right? So the industry shifted. And so all of a sudden we've now got people very interested in Storyvine for sales because of reduced access and they want to find ways to build relationships and maybe they're trying to be more efficient in how they do things as well. So that's kind of shifted. Um I'm trying to think what else. Another if there's a silver lining to a pandemic, but just from our perspective, um right now, everyone that we work with is way more camera aware than they were pre-pandemic, right? So getting people to be on camera and be comfortable sharing their story, that used to be a really heavy lift. And now people are more used to it. They're used to hopping on a Zoom call. They're used to setting up their backgrounds, right? They've got decent lighting. They don't look like they're in the witness protection program anymore, sitting in front of the bright window, you know? So that's been good too.
That's so cool. So yeah, tell me more about the last 6 months and how things are shifting.
So probably about a year ago, I started playing around. I started with generative AI. I started on the image generation side. So I was in a number of projects that where I was, generating images, and it was all pretty fascinating. And I was sort of going in and out of, making these pretty pictures, and at some point I would just go like, "What's the point?" And I'd sort of go away for a while, and then I'd come back, and I'm like, "No, this is really interesting." And then probably starting in August of 22, I said, there's something going on with AI that felt very familiar to me. So one of the things I got to experience in my life is in the mid 90s. In 1994, I discovered this thing called the World Wide Web, which was this new
That's
kind of
pretty
thing.
impressive that you discovered that.
Well, no, sorry. I personally discovered a thing someone else had created, Tim Berners, called the World Wide Web. It had been created years before, but the internet had been around for decades, and I've been kind of messing around on that. And then this World Wide Web kind of shows up, and people start talking about it. And I had an idea for an online magazine. So I went on vacation with my wife. I learned enough HTML. There were only like 6 tags, so it wasn't all that complicated, right? So I did the first issue of this magazine, and then I came back and I had to figure out how to get it onto some computer in California. So I used a dial-up modem to dial up this, computer in California and put my files there. And 3 weeks later, someone sent me a note on a dial-up bulletin board and said, "Hey, did you know that Urban Desires," that was the name of the magazine, "did you know that Urban Desires was written up in Liberation, the Parisian newspaper?" I was like, "No." And so I was living in New York City at the time. So I went down to the International Newsstand at Times Square and I bought this newspaper, and I'm flipping through it. And sure enough, there's this full page article with screenshots of this thing that I put on a computer in California. And it just all of a sudden hit me. Oh my God, the world just changed.
Yeah.
And I'm in the middle of Times Square and there's people milling about. I'm like, nobody knows what's coming. And I remember having this really palpable, like, I felt really lucky. Like, I felt like, "Oh my god, this is like" when I was in 7th grade, I was introduced to the personal computer, and I realized then I was just too young to be part of creating that, right? And I said, "This is like one of those." And kinda knew it in that moment. And so this AI stuff, I kind of had this similar kind of feeling. I said, I think there's something going on here. And so I ended up, teaching myself how to install Stable Diffusion, which is an image generating thing, and trained it up on my images using a thing called Dream Booth. And I was doing these kind of crazy self portraits, and I started an art project, and I was having a lot of fun with it. And then November 30th, 2022 happens, which is the day ChatGPT was launched. And I had an almost identical epiphany with ChatGPT as I had back in 1994, where I was sitting on the couch, my wife was watching some TV show I wasn't interested in, and I just started playing around with ChatGPT, and I knew that it could do some coding, and I said, "Write me a Python script that takes an input and does something with it." And so it generated a bunch of Python code, which was cool. But then I realized I don't know how to run Python code. So I had no way to test it. So I said to ChatGPT, "How do you run Python code?" It said, "Well, you open your terminal program and you type in this command line." I'm like, "Oh no, I don't like command line. Is there a website I can just do this?" And it said, "Sure, here's 3 websites." And it said, "You paste the code in the left panel, you hit the play button, and you see your application." So I copied the code, I hit the play button, and an error. It gave me an error. And I'm like, it gave me this error. And it said, "Oh, you don't have this library installed." And then it told me how to install the library. Within 90 minutes, I had written a complete functional application in Python that took someone's idea, turned it into 5 pieces of social media content within 90 minutes. I've still never written a line of Python in my life. So I just had this realization that everything's different, that this changes everything, right? And I know this is, I will circle back around to Storyvine. I know this is kind of a long journey, but it feels really important to me
Yeah.
that all of a sudden something shifted. And if you look at, so one of the things that I looked up is, I wonder how long it took us with the World Wide Web to get to 100 million users. It was 8 years to go from 0 to 100 million users. ChatGPT got to 100 million users in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, right? So it's a similar sort of friendly front end on top of a complicated back end, like the web was to the internet. So it's got parallels that way. So I started rolling AI technology into Storyvine. So now we have interactive transcriptions that are based on OpenAI's Whisper technology. So transcriptions up to this point had been so bad, you really couldn't use them. They weren't practical to use. So all of a sudden, this AI powered transcriptions are. And so now I've got this video platform where I now understand what the people are saying in the video. So now I can use generative AI to start to do things like generate social media content. So not only do you get a video out of this, you can also get a blog post out of it and tweets and, you know, pull quotes and just all sorts of interesting stuff. And so that's led to a whole reimagining of what the Storyvine platform is and can be, where you can have not only video inputs, but you can have text inputs, and not just video outputs, but omni-channel outputs. And so the vision for Storyvine is now this all singing, all dancing, omni-channel content engine.
Oh, wow. That is
Yeah.
so exciting. I love that you told that story though, because
Thank you.
it is so palpable. And I can just picture you in, what'd you say, Times Square, but you're in New York and you're just looking around going, oh my gosh, these people have no idea.
No, I did. And well, like what it was, you know, I put files on a computer in California. It was instantly accessible in Paris. And like they didn't have time to write a newspaper article about it. And I'm like, geography just collapsed. And so did time, right? The time of communication. It's like it's instant. And it was just like it just hit me, and it was just clear, like this changes everything.
Yeah.
And you could kind of see where it was headed, right? So yeah, it was just like I don't know. That's a moment I'll never forget because it was so clear.
Yeah. And it is fascinating. It's exciting to hear about, you as a CEO putting AI into place so quickly and being able to use it for good. Because there's a lot of concern out there about what's going to happen and, the fear of the unknown and of course, regulation and all those kinds of things that we've talked about on this show a few other times too. But there is so much possibility.
And that's where I'm trying to live. I think, I think there's a couple of things going on. Hollywood has trained us that the robots will kill us, right?
Yeah, right.
The robots will assimilate us. So I think it's actually, I think just societally, there's kind of a default to AI is evil. And I don't think it's because AI is necessarily evil. Like, I do think it's got all these possibilities of bad actors using it. And these are incredibly powerful tools. So I think all that's there. But where I'm trying to go is that there is, an equal possibility, on the other side of the dystopian coin.
Yeah.
This is going to make things better, that this is going to allow people to do more, to be more creative, to automate out the low level, non fulfilling work, and people can focus at a higher level. I think there's a very real chance this reconnects us as humans.
I
So
do too.
I'm trying to put on blinders and just kind of live in the, not so much utopian future, but more like, what can I do with this right now
Yep.
that transforms things for me, just even personally. Like it was really interesting. When I started playing with this AI stuff, it was kind of like Storyvine was here and AI stuff was here. And I couldn't really see how they could, come together. And I thought there's part of what Storyvine does that I think, AI is just going to do better. And so that kind of devalues what Storyvine is. And it took me 3 or 4 months to slowly kind of understand enough about what these tools were to be able to kind of have a vision for Storyvine that wasn't like throw out what we've done for a decade and start over with AI, but like how do you take the power and trust and legacy that we've built and augment that with AI? That's taken me 3 or 4 months to get to, but now that I've gotten there, as we're starting to present this vision to clients, they're losing their minds over it. In fact, we just had a major client said, this is so exciting. Can you fly out next week so we can talk about this in person? So it's like, that's a good sign, you know?
That's great.
Yeah.
That's super exciting. Yeah. I think focusing on the positive when we can is really great. I mean, it's so easy to focus on the negative and then we go down a spiral. So it's
Yeah.
exciting to see the possibilities.
Yeah. And there's also, I mean, listen, I think the level and speed and depth of disruption that's coming is way more profound than I think we're prepared for.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't think this is going to be without pain. Like even if you just say, let's take the dystopian bad robot part out of it, even if it's good change, it's change and it's going to be fast and deep and profound. And
That's
and
right.
and so I think a lot of folks are going to be displaced and there's going to be a lot of pain. That said, again, where I try to go back to the silver lining of this is all of those displaced people also have access to these tools. So just like people had access to the World Wide Web and they figured out what blogging was and they created blogging and they created social media, like all of the stuff that came out of the web being accessible to people. Similar thing with AI, but AI tools are way more powerful. So individuals, 2 or 3 people are gonna be displaced from a company, and they're gonna go, "You know what? What if we use these AI tools to go back and compete with the company that just dropped us?" I think we're gonna see a lot of that. So I think there's massive opportunity in the next 3 years, but it's gonna be, through the gauntlet of disruption.
Mm. Yeah. And really, we don't tend to change unless we're disrupted as
Right.
humans.
Well,
So,
that goes back to that sales thing, like, we've been pitching
yeah.
Storyvine sales for years. It wasn't until sales was disrupted that they all of a sudden said, "We need another tool."
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is exciting that it would potentially bring possibility for us to tap into the more human side of ourselves because humans have interacted sometimes or acted in work as machines,
Yeah,
and so we need to move away from the industrial, I'm a machine piece of the machine,
yeah,
and
you're the
into
cog.
I'm a human with creative potential and connective potential.
I'll share something with you. I was talking to a group that works in the nonprofit world. They work on grant writing. They're an organization that supports, grant writing and that sort of thing. And so I was explaining what I understood about AI and what I think was possible. And this one woman on the call, she goes, "So wait a minute." She goes, "So doesn't that mean someone could use AI to write these grants like much more quickly?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." And then she goes, "And then doesn't it also mean that we could read those grants a lot more quickly?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And she's like, "So could be a world where basically the AIs are talking to one another, sort of doing the grant application process." I'm like, "Yep." And then I said, "And then what's left?" And she goes, "People." I said, "Exactly. Like if the grant writing and the sort of reading and valuing that is automated, then what's left is, well, let's go talk to the person who's got this nonprofit. Let's understand if we like
Yes.
them, if we think they're going to spend the money well, if they're going to have an impact, if they have had an impact, right?" So there's a very real possibility that all of this time and energy spent on this complex process of how do you dole out free money, right? Automate all the complexity, and then what's left is impact and people and empathy and humanity. It's like, that's like, and I mean, I can see that in almost every industry.
Mm, I can too. That's great. I love this conversation. Kyle, tell me more about your team. How do you function as a team, or who's on your team? Or I mean, don't have to tell me names necessarily, but what does it look like? What's the structure?
Yeah, well, we're small, as they say, we punch above our weight, right? So
Yeah.
we're a small but mighty team. We're very trusted in the healthcare and pharma space. I think we have 6 or 7 full-time staff right now, and then we've got a tech team that's outsourced. I would say, part of the most significant member of my team is my co-founder Monique. And we've done a keynote on this, and we did it in full costume. We describe our relationship as the wizard and the warrior. And so I'm the wizard, I'm the hand wavy guy. She's the warrior. She keeps the trains running on time. And it's taken us it took us a number of years to learn that we view the world through very different lenses, and so that can lead to like communications challenges where, like, for example, one of those lenses is I have an ability to kind of see 10 years out. And so I can look at something right now and I can kind of imagine how that's going to play out a decade from now. So I'll see something and I'll get really excited about it, not because it's exciting now, but because it's excited then. And so I would take that idea to Monique and I would say, "Hey, I've got this idea." And she would just shut it down. And like one of the things we learned is she's looking at like the next quarter. Like, can we make payroll in the next quarter? Right. And I'm out here at 10 years, all excited about something that is potentially a threat for her job. So it took us a while to kind of figure out how to work together. But in the end, I don't know. Do you know the EOS entrepreneur operating system? So we did EOS, and that there it's the integrator and the visionary, right? So she's the integrator, I'm the visionary. Um, we like this Jungian archetypes thing of the wizard and the warrior, but that dynamic is actually really important for the business, right? Because it's because of her we can go through a security audit with Pfizer or Novartis or Merck and come out the other side successful, right? It's because of me that Storyvine's here, right? So sort of equally important, aspects of the business.
Yeah, yeah. So when you guys started the business, your co-founders, can you tell us a little bit about that? Like how that got started together? How you
Sure.
decided to work
So
together?
so I had started a company in '06 that was the precursor to Storyvine. So it was the basic idea was if you highly templatize short form content, then you could potentially scale the shows. So I was pitching CNN about doing political coverage this way. I was pitching NASCAR about doing fan generated shows at every level of the sport, like a big vision, right? I ended up getting hired by New Line Cinema to do entertainment content this way. So I packed up my big computer, my video gear, and I flew to California and we set up all the gear. And I'm like 4 hours into my first day of filming this, new, nimble, templated vision of a company. And I have this arrested development moment where, like, oh my God, I've made a terrible mistake. Where I realized there's nothing scalable about video production. As long as you're hoisting around gear and as long as you're manually having to deal with human beings who are complicated at best, right? As long as you're manually generating these giant files that someone has to hand edit, there was nothing scalable about it. So I'm a year and a half into that business and I just shut it down. I got my first job and shut the company down. I completed the job and and just dumped it. And so it went away for 5 years. So then I had the idea of what if you automated everything? And so that's what Storyvine is. So I had been consulting with Monique on a business she was in, and that ended up not going well. Co-founder issues. There were founder issues there. And so I knew that she was no longer doing that, and I knew that she had skills that I didn't. So I called her up and I said, "Hey, I've got this idea. It's this thing called Storyvine, and I explained it with all my hand wavy goodness." And she goes, "I have no idea what you're talking about, but let me go talk to some people." And so, being Monique, she interviewed 25 people. She had two opportunities. One was a video analytics company, and one was Storyvine. And so she calls me back like a week and a half later. She goes, "I talked to 25 people," and she goes, "25 out of 25 of them said they were not interested in the video analytics thing, but that they would buy Storyvine." She said, "I still don't understand what you're talking about, but I'm in. Let's do this."
There you go.
And yeah, and I mean, it's been quite a journey. We self-funded it. I sold a house and, self-funded it for the first 18 months or whatever. Then we raised some money. We in the early days, we were trying to sell an engagement with us for $1 million, because what we figured was if someone gave us $1 million, we'd go build the tech. We
Totally.
we didn't we didn't quite get there, but our first client was IBM. We got a $9,000 gig for a video for a Christmas party at IBM, and then we parlayed that into $100,000 annual contract with
There you
before we
go.
then we ended up raising a seed round in 2014. And, I'm like, we're going to be rich. This is going to be awesome. We're going to go build this tech and everyone's going to buy it. Right. So we raise about 900 grand, something like that. We hire a team, we build this tech, and I'm out there pitching everyone from an air conditioner repair guy to customer testimonials to Biogen iDeck, doing pharma stories and everything in between. So we're kind of 9 months into having raised this money, and I'm pitching everyone on the planet, and we ran out of money. And it was kind of one of those hell or high water moments where we had to lay off everyone we had just hired. Um, Monique and I had to cut our salaries in half to be able to survive. So, below a living wage. And Monique said, effectively, you've had your fun. We need to pick a single focus. We can't sell this to everyone. And she talked about the book Crossing the Chasm, where you need to find a beachhead, you need to find the early adopters, and you need to find a way to cross the chasm. And you can't do that if you're all over the place. And so we picked healthcare and pharma, and spent the next 18 months basically digging ourselves out of a hole and building a reputation in the healthcare and pharma space, and worked our way through it. But it was a rough 18 months.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah.
CEOs are all looking around going, okay, am I the only one?
Yeah. And that was existential. I mean, for me personally, it was 18 months of I would wake up in the morning and the first thing in my head was like this petulant little five-year old going, I don't want to go to work. And then it was like this angel devil thing. And then this other voice would go, but if you don't go, Storyvine doesn't exist. Cause right, we're a two-person company. So like if you don't show up to your own company, it literally ceases to exist. And then the devil would say, that's just your ego. Like you just can't let go of this because it's ego. And I would go back and forth and I would kind of land on, no, I think there's a thing here. I think this is a thing. Right. And so I would get in the car and drive down to Denver. I was living in Boulder at the time, but it was like 18 months of that every morning,
Hmm.
just not wanting to do the business. And that's, when I talk to new entrepreneurs or young entrepreneurs, one of the things I say is what's most important. And for me, it's, are you connected enough emotionally to the business you've started that when you hit that 18-month stretch, when you hit that brick wall, because you will, and it might be 3 months in, it might be a year in, it might be 5 years in, do you love it enough that you get out of bed? And I feel like that's where most businesses fail, is that the founder isn't quite connected to it, and they hit the wall and they're like, screw it, I'll go get a job.
Hmm.
Right. And what happened with me was like, I would sort of play this out. Okay. If Storyvine ceases to exist tomorrow, what would I do? And the answer was Storyvine, but I would find some other way to do it.
Interesting. Yeah. Good. In terms of leadership and where you're headed, what is your number one challenge as CEO looking into the last half of 2023? And I know that you've already talked about opportunity a little bit too. So however you want to frame that, both of those.
Well, so as excited as I am about this expanded vision of Storyvine, it's not something we've sold before. Storyvine is a technology, is a concept that has a lot of false positives, meaning people get really excited about it. And it took us a lot of years to figure out how to navigate the difference between enthusiasm and I'm willing to write a check.
Exactly.
Because this was a thing that no matter who we talked to, they were like, "Oh my God, you're going to change the world!" Like the hands were waving more than mine were. But getting them to write a check was a very different thing. So I think for me, the balance is going to be, and especially because we have um, a couple of our large clients excited about this new vision, navigating that transition. How do I take something that we've done for a decade and not flush that down the toilet while I add this other stuff? And can I add this other stuff in a way that is on solid enough footing that we don't lose the trust we've built with our other product, right? Because it's very possible I end up doing something new and shiny over here, built on technology that's not ready for prime time, and it falls on its face, right? So that's a danger, and it's also just a focus danger, right? So we know how to sell what we have now. Um, I'm personally impatient. I would love for this company to grow faster. I think there's a real opportunity here, but for me, it's navigating that transition. because it's not a pivot. It's more like an expansion of what we've done for a decade and sort of maintaining that core and kind of expanding around the edges. So that I'm really excited about, but it's all brand new.
Mm, yeah. My son just this came to mind. My son bought a game that before it was like the first Star Wars. It was a Star Wars game. I can't tell you what it is, whatever. But anyway, a few years ago, 2019, the Star Wars game that came out. Everybody loves the Star Wars game. There's a lot of hype up for this next Star Wars game that came out last week, and they thought everybody's saying it's going to be the best game of the year, all this kind of stuff. It comes out, and the responsiveness isn't as good. And so they're not having as much fun with it as I thought they would, and it's gonna be really hard to shift. I'm like, "What can they make changes to it? Is it gonna get better?" He's like, "I don't know. It might not."
Yeah, and yeah, it's a very similar thing where I feel like I've got my idea of what I think where I think the value will be moving forward, but it's not until I actually put it in someone's hand and deliver on it
Yeah,
that I see, oh, that thing I thought was valuable is worthless to them. But that thing that I thought was not all that interesting is the thing that they're totally excited about, right? And then did I spend 6 months building a thing that's not actually of value, right? Like, can I be nimble enough to actually kind of react in real time as clients are saying, I'm excited about this. So
yeah,
um I mean, that's the nerve-wracking part of it, but that's also, that's why I love being an entrepreneur, right? Like, you shouldn't be able to do what we're talking about doing. Let's go do that.
yeah. Yeah, love it. Okay. So, mental health of employees is one of the biggest concerns that we're hearing when we're talking to CEOs.
Mhm.
You have a small team, but I'm sure that you care about this. What is something that I mean, is this a concern of yours for your team, and what does your company do to kind of
Yeah,
support everybody?
it's a concern of this for me personally. It's a concern of this for the team.
Hmm.
I had a real rough time with COVID when it comes to so it's funny. A lot of the people on the team are introverts, and so when COVID and lockdown happened, they were living their best lives.
Yeah,
They were like, "I don't have any distractions. I just focus on my to-do list and stuff's getting done." And I'm sitting in my home office like, "Where'd everyone go?" And, you know, part of my immediate instinct, in March of 2020, whenever it started, was we need to have weekly Zoom calls. We need to keep things together. And both my head of delivery and my co-founder Larissa and Monique were both like, why? We're good. And so I ended up I did a daily video diary called An Extrovert's View from Within, where I did a video every day using Storyvine technology to talk about just what I was going through. And then, I thought it would be a month or two. And then kind of 3 months in, I'm like, oh, this is ending. So I ended up doing it for a year. Um, and so now we're kind of 3 years out from this thing. And, the company survived, which I feel very fortunate about. And we're still doing well. But for me, a thing that's been lost is that intangible connection to, like, we're doing this as a team. Like, it
hmm,
almost feels like at this point that Storyvine is a series of to-do lists that we kind of check in multiple times a week to see how everyone's doing on their to-do list, as opposed to like that that invisible thing where you just kind of have a barometer of the health of the business when you're in person, where you can just kind of see if shoulders are slumped, or you can just hear in someone's voice if they're kind of not quite right. All of that now is kind of shielded behind, all of this technology. And so so for me personally, it's not as much fun, because I get energy from people. And so, we really don't have that. Monique and I come to the office. I'm in an office now. Like, I also don't have the self-discipline to really work from home. I'm not good at it. I had to put lots of structure in place so I could even function. So I think that's that. We tend to have a very open culture at Storyvine. So we talk a lot about mental health. We talk a lot about Larissa, who heads up delivery for us. She's our VP of delivery. She used to work right across from me here. And sometimes it'd be like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She'd just walk into my office, close the door, and flop on the floor and just lay down with her arms out and go, "I'm done." And we would just have like, like a 2 hour shoot the shit session about not about work, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of have it in the culture to talk about this stuff. But I feel like the impact of COVID and social distancing and, screw it, we don't need to go back to the office. I think the effects of this are going to be quite profound. Again, I think it's why I'm excited about AI being a tool that potentially um, re-engages us as humans, because I feel a hunger for that. But it's also weird. Like, you go to a networking event now, and it's like, wait, how do you talk to humans again? Do I give a card? Why do I have cards? What are these cards? Everything feels foreign, right? But I also feel like when I do that and have a human connection, I'm like, oh yeah, this is why we did this. Right. And like that feels very missing for me.
Community requires proximity of some
Yeah.
kind and doing things together. And it doesn't mean that it all has to happen in person, but if you don't have a sense of community,
And even if you do, all these changes, like it just changes the dynamic. It's just there's something missing.
yeah.
And I think it does have mental health implications. It does for me personally.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like I'm sad a lot, and I'm not sad like we're not doing as well as we want or this. I'm just sad like it's like just like this. Like, where'd everyone go?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I get that. Yeah. And then the question remains like what do you how do you handle that individually and how do you handle it when you're responsible for a team?
yeah,
And that's a toughie cuz it's not just about going to counseling. It's
mhm,
nice to go to counseling. There that can be helpful, but to actually just experience life with people is totally
yeah,
different.
yeah. And it's we talk about doing team building things, but there's also very practical like business development challenges where what I've found is that maintaining relationships with Zoom calls and things is okay, but
Yep.
generating new relationships is almost impossible.
Yep. I'm hearing that too.
Right? And a big part of our marketing used to be we would go to events and we would film videos using our technology and we would meet people. And a lot of those, we wouldn't end up working with someone that we had met until 3 or 4 years down the line. And they would just call us out of the blue and like, hey, remember me? We met at Digital Pharma East and you filmed a video of me. And I would sort of pop in and I'd watch the video and I'd remember meeting them. All of that's gone. And it's been gone for 3 years. And so it's like, everyone's shifted to digital, which means that all of the prospects are being inundated with digital communications. And so that's rough as well. And I don't know how to backfill that. Like I don't know how to replicate that. I don't, I feel like a major component of our, of our pipeline has just been sort of plucked out of the game.
Mm.
I don't know how to replace it.
Mm. Important things to think about, grapple with.
Yeah.
Um, so do you have managers? A couple questions that I have to do with managers. Do you have managers, or how do you consider the management structure?
Yeah, well, one thing that I accepted in the past year and a half or so is that I am a terrible manager. So I was managing some folks because I had a creative, and so I was managing the creative side of delivery, and I just realized I'm bad at this. And Larisha, who heads up delivery, is actually really good at it. So I think one thing about management is understand if you're good at it or not. If you've got a small team, and backfill it and admit that to yourself. Because I went probably 5 years too long without admitting that, and you know, didn't manage well. And that's not fair to the people I manage either. I think the other thing about management, I learned this when I was co-founder of agency.com back in the mid 90s. That was one of the things I did back then. And we grew really, really fast. We grew to 2,200 people in 5 years. So
Wow.
I've been part of, kind of a rocket ship kind of thing, and growth issues. And one of the interesting things about management is that there's I think there's an external draw too. I want to get promoted. I want to get promoted. I want to get promoted. And someone who is excellent as a doer gets promoted into management, and they're horrible as a manager, and they also hate managing. That doing is different than managing. And so one of the things that we put in place here at Storyvine, even though we're not growing quickly, but we've got tracks in place, that if you're a doer, there's a promotion track that doesn't involve you managing people. It involves you mentoring and becoming more of a capabilities leader. So I think recognizing management as a distinct skill,
Yeah.
not just necessarily the thing that you get promoted into,
Yeah.
um, that to me feels really important because some people are like, I had someone at agency.com, guy named Paul Galley, just a great, great guy. He's gone on to do really interesting things, but he was a site builder, and, he'd been there for a while and people were getting promoted up around him. And he was like, I want to be promoted. And so we promoted him into a management role because that was all we had. And 6 months later, he walked into my office and said, "Can you unpromote me?"
Yeah.
And it was the first time that like I had interacted with someone that was clear enough about the distinction between managing and doing, and self-aware enough to know that they were miserable. Right? And I thought, "Oh my god, it was so powerful." So that to me is actually really important.
Yeah, I think that I love that. I love the distinction between managing and doing. Sometimes we call the doers more of the subject matter experts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if people get their joy and get their fulfillment from doing, management is a wasteland, but other people love managing. Like, it's not managing's not a bad thing. I'm bad at it, right? But Larisha's masterful at it. So's Monique, right?
Yeah. So, do you mind sharing what skills that they have that you don't have? Like what why how did you recognize that you were not a good manager
Um,
or shouldn't be in a management role?
While I appreciate process and know that it's required to make a business succeed, I'm horrible at it and resist it. So we're supposed to have our quarterly meetings. I didn't have my quarterly meetings because I didn't schedule them, right? And then the paperwork of documenting all that stuff was bad. I, card carrying member of the ADHD club, given three tasks in front of me, one of which is come up with a way to deliver the news that someone's not doing good at their job or doing two other exciting things. I would do the two other exciting things. So I would tend to just let the necessary feedback, constructive feedback, I would let it slip until it would build up. And then I would not deliver that message articulately. And I would do it with emotion and frustration because it'd been building up for 9 months,
Yep.
right? Because I
Yep.
didn't real time. Um, and then also just, I don't know, being actively involved in what the people I was managing were up to. Were they enjoying it? Just like regular checking in. I was kind of more of like, if anything's wrong, they'll let me know, right? So I think it was for me, it was just a proactive thing. Like I just didn't do the work, right? I didn't do the work of management, which is very distinct, specific stuff,
Sure.
right? And anyway, I forget what was happening, but it was something we were coming up with something, and we were talking about um, like the upcoming reviews we had to do or whatever it was. And Monique was talking about what she was doing, and then Larisha was talking about what she was doing, and then it came to me, and I said, "Can I say something, guys? I'm horrible at this, and I hate it." And I think it was Larisha said, "Larisha's great." She was like, "You are, and if you want, I'll take that." She knew, like, nothing's a secret for one
Right.
thing. Like, if you're crappy at something, you might think you're pulling the wool over the eyes, but you're not, right? And so she was just very gracious and said, "Let's figure out what your role is, because I'm still, leading creative reviews and things like that. But let's figure out the management piece of that." And then she took that on as part of her. And so we promoted her to head up all of delivery that included, both creative and account and things like that. And, I think it was much, much better for the company, and much, much better, for me personally, just because
Yeah.
when you're bad at something, it doesn't feel good.
No, no, it doesn't. And Kyle, you're
Right?
not the only
Especially when it involves, other people's lives, right? If you're bad at management, you're kind of screwing up other people's lives.
Sure.
Doesn't feel good either.
And you're not the only person that I've talked to who's in a position like you who is, who feels that way.
Yeah.
And you've been so forthcoming. I wonder if you could share, if you were to give advice to people who have a CEO or a supervisor like you, or somebody in their company like you who they've got all the ideas and they're moving the company forward and doing so many important things, but maybe they're falling behind on, some sort of deliverable or some sort of routine thing.
Mm.
How can people go to somebody like you, and what do you recommend they do or say that would help that situation? That would be a good way to approach you.
I think just be straight about it. I mean, like there's a piece of this where if there's a culture that if you speak straight to the boss, whether it's a CEO or some other leadership figure, and you get your head chopped off, that's an almost impossible conversation to have. So I think one thing is the CEO open to hearing they might suck at management? Are they open to hearing ideas from other people? So if you're in a culture where that's not okay, um, me personally, I can't work in a culture like that. So I would leave that, right? So you can't change the stripes on a zebra. Um, but a lot of times what you'll have is, especially in startups, the founders do everything because when you start a company, you have to do everything. So a lot of times you're doing things a certain way because that's the way you did it on day three, and you just haven't had time to change it. And so very often, what I would say is this: very often, when someone like Larisha will come to me and say, "Hey, Kyle, this sucks," whatever the this is, right? Very often, upon it coming out of her mouth, I'm like, "Oh yeah, that does suck. We should change that," right? So chances are actually good that if there's an issue like that, the CEO or whoever it might be is probably aware that either they're not good at something or how they do something is kind of stupid and right, and that could be done a better way. But here's the thing that I'll say, is the nuance to bringing this message to leadership. So my co-founder of agency.com, a guy named Chansu, brilliant guy. He was the warrior to my wizard of agency.com. But he had a saying. He said, "Anytime you walk into my office, there's a pile of rocks on my desk. And when you walk into my office, you either take a rock off my pile or you put one on my pile." So if you've got, "Hey, boss, you're not great at management," and you just walk in and say, "Hey, boss, you're not great at management," you just stuck probably two or three rocks on that CEO's pile. But if you walk in and say, "Hey, I've noticed this, you're not great at management, but I have an idea." And the idea is, I'd be willing to take that on for you, but I'd still want you to participate in this, that, and the other. But all of the sort of tactical day to day management stuff, I'm already doing that over here. I'm really good at process. And if you want me to take that off your plate, I'd be happy to. Those are two very different conversations. So I think if you come to a CEO, especially or a founder with a solution, here's the crappy thing, but here's my idea of it. It's just a completely different conversation. So that would be how I would approach it.
Oh, love that. Okay. Two more questions for you. One I'm going to ask first is, any particular influences for you?
Just professionally,
Yeah, professionally, as a leader, as a entrepreneur.
I'm reticent to say it just because he carries so much baggage with him. But Steve Jobs was always a hero of mine. Mm, he was also an asshole, right? He was also like he is notoriously like not good with people, and like I've even heard some things recently about what he did, Steve Wozniak, and just not a good guy. But his clarity on what was good and what was bad. Like here's the thing. Steve Jobs was willing to have a point of view. And I think every company exists because someone had a point of view. There's a better way to do this. I have an idea. I want to, the world needs this, right? There's this point of view. And so that ability to look at the world and I don't know, see it for what it is and go, not only is there something wrong that I want to fix, there's something wrong that I want to fix that I have enough energy and passionate about that I'm willing to sort of dump myself into it to solve that problem. Yeah. Yeah, I would say him. And it was also, so the reason he's probably the one that's most on the list. When I was in 7th grade and I walked into my first day of 7th grade math class, and there were TRS-80 computers on every desk, and I learned to use these personal computers. And when I recognized how powerful these things were, and I recognized I was just too young to have invented these things. And, like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were in Newsweek and Time Magazine, and you saw pictures of them building these things. And I remember being just really sad that I wasn't a part of it. So, he kind of lived in that iconic place of, the printing press and the personal computers and the industrial revolution. Like there are these big milestones. And so that's that for me, that's why him.
Yeah. All right. One more question after I ask you, where can people find Storyvine? Because I think, yeah, there might be some people interested.
Yeah, storyvine.com is where that is. But also, if you want to play around with this AI stuff, I've got a TikTok channel called the AI Learning Lab. I've started an AI salon at thesalon.ai, and we meet bi-weekly and we have meetings. We have a Discord server where you can geek out and play with AI stuff. And so, yeah, I'm passionate about that community as well.
Great. We'll link to that in the show notes.
Terrific.
Um, Last question for you. If What last piece of advice would you give to somebody who wants to have a voice of influence in their company?
Don't ask for permission because the answer is probably no. But if you just do it, if you, I would say have self awareness, um, understand what you're passionate about. And if you have an idea for something, um, start taking action on it rather than asking if it's okay if you take action on it.
Hmm,
And
great.
if you screw up, someone will tell you.
There you go.
But if you ask them if you can do it, the answer is probably no, because we don't do it that way.
Such an entrepreneurial answer. I love it. Okay. Thank you so much, Kyle. It's been great to have you. Thank you for being a voice of influence for our
Yes.
audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.